Institute for Next Generation Food Systems Spring Speaker Series. My name is Hannah Bartram, and I'm the Education and Public Engagement Coordinator for APHIS. And today we are delighted to welcome our spring speaker panelists for a more in-depth discussion. But before I introduce the panel, let me give a quick introduction to the AI Institute for Next Generation Food Systems, also known as AIFS or APHIS. The Institute was established in 2020 under an NSF USDA NIFA grant with the mission of developing and leveraging transformative AI for the ethical production and distribution of safe, sustainable, nutritious food with fewer resources. APHIS is a multidisciplinary collaboration between researchers at 6 different institutions, conducting research with a holistic integrated view of the food system, solving challenges in molecular breeding, agricultural production, food processing and distribution, and nutrition, as well as focusing on the people behind the food system using AI and technology as enablers. If you would like more information on the research and engagement activities of APHIS, please visit our website and connect with us on social media. Our speaker series features thought leaders addressing food system challenges using artificial intelligence. Today's panel concludes our spring series, but you can find all of the recordings on our YouTube channel. And we will return in the fall with more engaging talks. Today, I'm delighted to be reintroducing 3 of our speakers from the spring. Sofia Elizondo is the co-founder and COO of Brightseed, a biotechnology company that harnesses artificial intelligence to reveal critical compounds in plants to address humanity's greatest health challenges. As an award-winning tech business leader, Sofia is committed to endowing people with fundamentally longer and healthier lives and has built multi-million-dollar companies and brands in the consumer goods, pharmaceutical, and technology industries. Prior to Brightseed, she led the commercialization of plant-based protein products, including the novel mung bean protein isolate to replace egg functionality. Sofia began her career at the Boston Consulting Group and was also a founding member of the BCG Henderson Institute, the consulting firm's think tank on the future of business innovation. She also served as an advisor to the UN Global Compact, the United Nations agency focused on the private sector, while it developed its global corporate sustainability standards released at the 2011 World Economic Forum in Davos. Her decades of leadership in the space of corporate social innovation now enable Brightseed's mission to resource companies looking for scientifically validated and naturally derived products that can transform human health. Our next panelist is Allison Kopf, who is the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Data Products at iUNU, the leading artificial intelligence company serving the controlled environment agriculture industry. Previously, Allison founded the CEA company Artemis, which was acquired by iUNU. And Artemis won the highly coveted Disrupt Cup at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco in 2015. Allison was named one of Forbes' 2019 30 Under 30, as well as the 2021 Global Women Fresh Women of Impact. She's a sought-after speaker on the future of agriculture, giving keynotes at such conferences as TEDx, Forbes 30 Under 30 Summit, Forbes Ag Tech Summit, and the All Tech Ideas Conference. She sits on the boards of Santa Clara University's College of Arts and Sciences, the Sioka Center for Entrepreneurship, and Cargill Edge, and is an entrepreneur in residence at Ireland's National Accelerator and DRC, and is an investment partner at X Factor Ventures. And our third panelist is Oliver Vince, who's a co-founder of Basecamp Research, a London-based biotech startup that specializes in exploring nature to discover and design biological solutions. By partnering with biodiversity hotspots and biotechnology companies across the globe, they are addressing the systemic challenges that limit commercial biodiscovery. Combining exponentially growing data collection capabilities with purpose-built graph architecture provides Basecamp Research with a vast, comprehensive, and unique view of Earth's metagenome, allowing complex design problems to be addressed with ease. And the team at Basecamp Research spans an enormous range of expertise, from explorers and diplomats to data scientists and biotech pioneers. Before Basecamp Research, Oliver completed an undergrad in engineering science and a PhD in cancer research at the University of Oxford in the UK. Unfortunately, our fourth speaker from the speaker series, Karim Picharad, CTO and co-founder of NotCo, was unable to join our panel today, but you can catch his talk on the APHIS YouTube channel. Today's discussion will be moderated by Harold Schmitz, co-founder and general partner of March Capital US LLC and a senior scholar in the Graduate School of Management at UC Davis. And today's discussion is meant to be very interactive, so please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section throughout today's event. Thank you so much for joining us today, panelists, and Harold, I will pass it over to you.
Excellent, thanks, Hannah. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and as Hannah noted, we definitely want to keep this as interactive as possible. So for sure, send in your questions. As a little bit of background before we dive into the first question that I've got lined up for the panel is the previous speaker series we heard from call it very large enterprise representatives from very large enterprise, both from industry as well as the university. And in this speaker series, we've had a chance to hear from representatives from more of the the startup space. So there's a classic technique that's come into play for looking at strategic objectives these days with it's called zoom out and zoom in, right? And obviously everybody's got their camera, and so it derives from that a little bit in terms of taking pictures with your telephone camera. But that's a really valuable perspective to zoom out and zoom in. And so the previous speaker series there were a lot of zoom out perspectives. So we heard from UC Davis, we heard from Novozymes, we heard from Mars. And those were really diverse zoom out perspectives. And in the startup environment, there's a lot of zoom in perspective for obvious reasons. And so one of the strategic questions for the AI Institute for Next Generation Food Systems is, well, there's one dimension of zooming across the whole food system, from farm to fork, or however one wants to put it, but that whole food system. There's also the perspective, and how can AI play in that? There's also the perspective of how can and should AI play in terms of its role in discovery through to translation through to scaling. And there's concepts like covering the valley of death and that sort of thing. And so, with this panel series, or this particular panel session in the group here, we have an opportunity, I think, to really, think hard about, okay, at that interface of the university, as represented by APHIS and the 4 partner universities, and the early stage startups who are, they're translating discovery into commercial, innovation, and they're going to begin the path across the, so-called valley of death towards hopefully towards scaling and success. What is it? How do we need to think about the AI interface there? So that's a general overview, and that leads me into my first question, and I'll sort of go across the screen. And just to prepare you guys, I have Oliver, Sofia, and then Allison in that order across my screen. So I'll ask you guys in this order. So Oliver, you'll be up first. But the first question is really, when it comes to the food sector, and this includes industry, university, as well as government, it's a legacy sector, multi-trillion-dollar legacy sector, and it, like every sector, it goes through these dynamics. In the last few decades, it's been more in the legacy side as opposed to the more dynamic side of developments. And now we have AI coming into it. And that, it's going to shake up the food sector, same way it's going to shake up every other sector. For it to do that, it's kind of got to migrate to the nucleus. So in other words, AI has to find its way into the center of the business model or enterprise model. Otherwise, it can't really, make a significant impact in terms of on decision making for these enterprises. And so that's been a journey right now, and I'd like to, for the sector and companies within it, so I'd like to hear from each of you guys, for what you represent and how you see things. Where is AI in terms of your enterprise model? Is it at the center? Is it on the edge? Is it somewhere in between? And how do you think about maximizing the advantage that you get, the decision-making advantage you're going to get from AI in this context? So I'll start with you, Oliver.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Harold, and thank you to APHIS for having me on the panel today. That's really, really kind of you. So with your question about sort of AI in part of business models, I think the interesting part of being a startup potentially is that you can build the business from scratch. So you're not trying to retrofit and technology into a business. You can build a business centered around that technology. And I think, there's been a lot of hype for a long time about the potential of AI in biotech, AI for different applications. Basecamp Research, we focus on the discovery end, so we focus on sourcing novel ingredients, novel proteins, novel biochemistries from diverse areas around the world and making that process predictable. But part of our, the core of our business is the data, and more than just the data, the information that we capture from the natural environment and the ability to use that for design. I think in the food space, the use of AI for design of new proteins, new molecules for different applications. So there's the sort of slightly complex things like stabilizers, gelling agents, foaming agents, and there's even more complex functions, sort of taste and smell, that at the moment we can't attain using AI, right? The information within the data that we have doesn't exist. So at Basecamp, as much as we talk about being AI first, it's really a data first or information first game. So we focus on building a information-rich data set in the middle of our business, from which we can derive insights both on the biodiversity side, so where have things come from, but also on the product side downstream. And I think to answer your question, very directly, the AI part and the information part that allows you to do sort of successful AI campaigns, AI design campaigns, is absolutely core to everything we do. And I think that's sort of our unique proposition to the larger companies that haven't yet focused on building out that capability within their business.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sofia.
I love the question, and I think Brightseed is a health company, and we focus on the impact that novel bioactives can have on human health or natural bioactives, whether they're existing or new to science. And many of these are found, most of these are found in their existing food system. The heart of Brightseed is the technology platform that we built to find these natural bioactives. And AI is not a feature of it. It is a fundamental piece of it's not even a fundamental piece. It is the reason that we can do what we do. Much like what you were describing, Oliver, we build the company around this capability. Brightseed needs AI in order to see the phytochemicals that exist in nature. And without it, we have no visibility, so nothing to optimize around. And we need AI in order to predict what these natural compounds are likely to do for health. So in order to identify which of these are potentially bioactive. And with all of these AI capabilities, we can then arrive at a subselection of compounds that we validate clinically to ensure that they are indeed having the benefits that we think they have. And then we go and work with farmers to find the food sources that are most likely to deliver this bioactive benefit to consumers in different formats. So there is a lot of translation that happens on the downstream, both clinically and on harvesting and growing, harvesting and production. But without AI, there is nothing to see and there is nothing to optimize around. And that is certainly in fundamentally core to Brightseed.
So before I move to Allison, so do you ever have a management team or executive team meeting where the letters A and I do not come up, or do they come up every single meeting you guys have?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think Forager comes up a lot, and that is the name the name of our internal platform. It's funny because practically, I don't think it comes up very much, Harold, but I think it's because it's inherent, right? We don't have AI meetings because everything we do is that. You know, we've when we hire and build for teams, you know, on the computational side, it's a given that we are building out these capabilities. So we use it a lot externally, so that folks can, you know, put Brightseed in context. And internally in our internal meetings and management team meetings and board meetings, it's a given that this is how we do what we do.
Yeah, but you said forager comes up a lot, which is really, really important. But what you guys have done is, you know, and others have done it as well, but I think it's actually an important component. There's probably a seat at the management team table that could be labeled forager. You've almost humanized the the capability. But anyway, Oliver, you were going to say something, and then we'll go to Allison.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Sofia said. I mean, I don't think we talk about AI as such. We talk about the knowledge graph. We call it base data, not database, imaginative. So that's kind of our core asset. But, you know, we focus on, one way of thinking about it is we try and, it's using graph technology, right? So it's a knowledge graph rather than a simple database that most people have. And what that allows you to do is focus on relationships between the data rather than the information points themselves. And once you have the information between the data, you can map it out and work with it. Those conversations about whether the data set up right, about the amount of data, about the quality of the relationships, about all the different things that allow you to recognize the patterns in the data is every conversation in some part. And then the AI is just the natural sort of easy next step once you've done that. But that's, in our mind, at least the hard part.
Awesome. Thank you. Allison?
Yeah, I'm going to answer it from a slightly different lens, because what I thought about the question that was interesting is, one, you asked 3 AI companies if AI is core to our business. The answer is yes, right? All 3 of us should answer yes, or else we should reevaluate our business probably. But the more interesting side of this is, to me, how all of our customers think about AI, and is AI core to their business? Because I think what you were kind of hinting at is, until that answer is yes, then the work we do can't really get to that next scale level, right? And so to that, I want to kind of dig into that a little bit, which is, you know, what we do from a lens. And I have a show and tell, because it'll keep popping back behind my head all the time, which is our Luna system. And so, you know, we focus on computer vision and AI, and using imagery in particular, and data from manual sets that comes into digital sets for the first time, to really put plants at the center of optimization, which has been a missing criteria for AI really taking off in the last decade or so in our industry, in particular in the greenhouse and vertical farming industries. And so what we're able to do is reprioritize into what is the core of the business for our customers. And that is ultimately, at the end of the day, the plant. What is actually growing? How does it grow? How does it interact with its surroundings? How does it learn as it goes? How does our system learn as it goes? How do we match those 2 behaviors in order to really put, again, the plant at the center of optimization? And that actually changes the dynamic for the customer tremendously, right? Instead of thinking about pointed solutions kind of on the edge, like you were talking about, which there are plenty of, right? There's lots of AI in our industry right now. And there's lots of really good solutions for various things. But instead of thinking about it as a pointed solution that only works on this one particular function, right? So you've got tons of these things, whether it's looking at smarter climate control in a greenhouse, or automating the harvesting processes for certain crops, or automating irrigation, or automating light control, or automating any of these pieces, which tend to be really functionally edge case, right? They're one specific thing, and it may solve it really, really, really well. But it's not at to your question, core of how a customer thinks about every day, what a farmer thinks about every day. What the customer thinks about at the end of the day is the plants. And if you can deliver artificial intelligence that really functionally improves the quality or rate at which they grow, or all of those things, ideally the risks that are inherent in growing a crop, and you put all of those together in a centralized platform, you're now shifting that thinking to putting AI actually at the heart of their business, which is far more interesting to me, because if you can do that, you can start to actually have AI be commonplace in their business. And so I think there's a more interesting question that you asked Sofia, which is, do you have AI in every meeting? Sure, we're talking about AI literally every day, right? That is what we do as a business, but does a farmer think about AI as part of their business? Is it in every one of their meetings? And the answer is probably no. For most people, at least in the ag industry in particular, and when you're thinking about our customer. But they're starting, we've been around since 2013. We've been deployed in the field since 2013. And those conversations are definitely changing.
That's great, great perspective. And really love the point about, so there's obviously you guys, somehow or the other, it's at the core and in the nucleus, but, with other customers or other parts of the industry that you interact with, not necessarily, and probably almost certainly not. And so this is, I think this sort of drives this point, which is really important for APHIS and its member universities to really, really, think hard about, is one of the roles of APHIS is actually, because APHIS does span the whole thing, by definition, from big players in the sector, multinationals, to the startups, and everything in between, plus the research infrastructure. And it's actually helping to bridge this gap, because you're absolutely right, Allison, that a lot of the big players don't have it there, but you guys got to figure out how to get it in there. Plants at the center is an interesting way. So another interesting way, kind of building off of that, is the data assets question. And so every AI-based company or company that utilizes a significant chunk of AI, the question always becomes, well, what are the data assets that we're building our value proposition off of, and what would we like to have that we don't have? And there's always something that you would like to have that you don't have. So I'd like to, and I'll start, Allison, with you. So we'll switch it up now. So it'll be Allison, Sofia, and then Oliver last. But the question would be, what are data assets that you wish you could have access to improve your value proposition, that perhaps APHIS could help you obtain if you're not able to obtain it now?
Sure, there's a ton of things, right? So an agricultural business is a really complex operation, and it's combining multiple biological systems into one, right? And that adds a layer of complexity that is different than most businesses. So when you think about manufacturing, or you think about a lot of the areas where AI has really taken off, you have relatively static systems. We have very similar behaviors, but it's adding biology on top of that. And so how plants interact into their surroundings is incredibly complicated, but then you're also adding on top of that human labor and all these other types of challenges that are a little bit maybe more typical in other industries as well. One of the things, so when I built my company, Artemis, which was acquired by iUNU, one of the core theses at the heart of what we were doing was trying to take the really unstructured, very manual data, the stuff that's really hard to think about, because you haven't really conceptually created data sets out of it before, and try and move that into a digital system for the first time. We've now been very successful at doing that for certain things like crop planning, so timeline schedules, things like that. We've done the base level for labor planning and labor expectations, but where we haven't gone deeper, where I think there's a huge, tremendous opportunity, is thinking about that people interaction, people to their system, for example, how people are moving around, what are they doing, how are they doing things, how long are they spending doing things. All of that is a relatively manual process to collect right now, and automating the data collection behind that would be incredibly valuable data set. So I think that's a good piece, is how people interact with the system and how that works over time. The second thing I'd say is that for cameras and computer vision, really good at capturing certain data sets, right? You can capture what's happening on top of the plants, you can happen what's around the plants. Typically, you're not collecting things like what's happening underneath leaves and things, right? And so, or what's happening at the root side, because you can't see through things yet. We don't have the ability to do that, as far as I know. But there are opportunities for systems that can do that. So integrating other data sets and data capture for things that are happening in those, that sort of what's increasingly a 3D world and also biological system. And so thinking about root structures and root quality is really important to the plant health. And thinking about what happens underneath leaves or what's hidden around that you can't actually spot or see via eye or camera is a really interesting opportunity for things like sensing technologies and whatnot. So I'd say those two pieces are really, really interesting, very technically difficult. And so big opportunity out there if anybody's working on them, and you should definitely reach out to us. We're happy to collaborate on that.
Awesome. And before Sophia, you answer, I'll just note there's some questions that are rolling in. So after we get to the end of this with Sophia and Oliver, then we'll go to those that are being submitted. So anyway, Sophia, over to you.
Really great question. It's like the magic wand question, right? It's like if you could, feed your AI, whatever, what would that be? And first, a bit of a level set. Lee Che, my co-founder, CTO, and the architect of Forager, always explains that AI is not magic, and it's actually only really good at solving really specific questions when it has a lot of very clean data. And without it, it's very hard to, you get, crap in and noise in and noise out. So at Brightseed, we start with the plant and we make our own data. We bring in plants in-house. We put them through kind of Forager's wet lab process, and we generate data of its phytochemical composition. And then we do that on the other side too. We generate our own data of decades of biomedical literature. We actually curate that data that is already existing, but we curate it into a system that we can use and query and then use for training as we tap into natural compounds that exist in the plants and their impact that they could have on biology based on these kind of biological targets that have already been discovered, have a lot of literature behind them. So we curate data that's existing on one side, and then we generate that, kind of fingerprint data from plants on the other side. And it's the only way that we found that we can have enough consistent data to be able to see the compounds that are in there and to predict what they can do for health. So I think however, I think if we could, and it's something kind of provocative to think, is like how in the APHIS ecosystem, like how could we collaborate further? If we could, we would have a really thorough meta data, like labels essentially on all of the pieces that we collect. We especially on plants. So we bring plants in-house and we go through hundreds of plants that have a history of human consumption, because that is where we believe is a gold mine of natural bioactives that can impact health. But if we could have all of the metadata around each of these samples, what their soil conditions were like, what the climate was like when they were growing, a rainfall, temperature, harvest period, all of that impacts, what plants express. And we know that very kind of intuitively through wine. It is kind of this, if you were to bring in one sample of one vine, you would have a baseline of data, but we all know that Zinfandel is very different than Malbec, and it's very different, from a Chardonnay. And even within each of these, there is tremendous variety based on the growing conditions, the processing and harvesting conditions. So if we could kind of have that quality of resolution of metadata to go with everything that Forager ingests, it would be really exciting, because today we only tap into that resolution once we know there is signal. Hey, this plant has something really important for this health condition. Now let's double click into all of the varieties and all of the growing conditions and all around the world to understand which kind of plant, which subspecies can give us the most of the good thing that we found inside. But if we could gather all of that up front, that would be, enriching the knowledge base even faster and could be really fantastic.
So that's really interesting. It's and it is like from a university government sector perspective. So for example, at UC Davis with the viticulture and enology group, what they've done is that meta, sort of perspective to a large degree, world leading in many respects in terms of cultivar type, plus, terroir, and whether that matters or doesn't matter. So we need a new data layer called terroir. But anyway, so Oliver, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you said, Sophia. I mean, we should definitely chat because what we do is we actively collect samples from around the world. We have a field team that goes out. We work on the ground with biodiversity partners. And the big part of what we do is metadata collection. So we do the rainforest, the climate. So the way I try and think about this is you want to capture everything that's going on in the natural environment. And so you start at is it the North Pole or is it the equator? Then you sort of dig down into, is it, what sort of biome is it? Well, then you dig down into sort of, is it rainforest? Is it swamp? Is it hot spring? And then you go down and down and down until eventually you get to sort of plant-plant interactions, micro-plant interactions. You get within samples, you get sort of virus micro interactions. Then you get down to sort of the protein, the biochemistry level. And the graph that we build tries to replicate all of that. But to move on to, so the reason that's relevant for Harold's question is that this data set is really great and really useful and really interesting, but it's only useful when you can apply it to a problem that the partner has. And the reality of being a startup is you can't collect all the data you want. So you pick one data set, you pick one source of information that you're going to run towards, and you do really well at that, and you collect, the most amazing data set in the world, but you're only ever going to have that data set because you don't have the resources or the time or the years of experience that these big companies have. Now, the way that these systems work really well is when you interface two sets of information together, thinking about examples from other fields of AI where people have used very, very small sets of information, interpolated off lots of other information that like sort of previous learning of information they've had before, they're able to generate products that help for other people. Now, so specifically to that point, we call it discovery, then design, then development. So we do discovery for people. We discover something new from nature that they can use. We then design it, tweak it in silico for then their application, and then we help them with the development process. So as it goes into their tank, as it goes into their pipeline, whatever it is, we work with them to make sure it's optimized for that process. Now, in that development part, you are very, very, very subject to the scientists they're using, the tank they're using, the size of reactor, the temperature, the conditions, all those different things. And for that, you will always need information from them. So for a small startup like us, the information that is most valuable to us is the data sets that people have accumulated over sort of 20, 30 years from testing these things, but aren't really using. And I think that's where, we've had some really nice collaborations with some of the largest nutrition companies out there, where, once you build up a trusting relationship, once you're very open and transparent, you can get to a point where they're sharing information that they don't really know what to do with, and you're able to generate insights. And as long as you can have the right firewalls and the right sort of, limitations on contracts, all that sort of stuff, you can have really nice collaborative relationships where you're trying to use their insight to generate better results. And sort of as a final point, the way I had some interesting conversations with R&D scientists, big companies saying like, AI will never replace me, AI will never get rid of me. And it's like, no, but not try and do that. The way to think of it is like Google. When you do a Google search, Google's not giving you the one web page you should ever look at. It gives you the top 10 or the top 20 that you should think of, and then you manually screen the rest of it, right? It gives you a manageable number. It gives you something you can understand as a human. What we're trying to do is get to the point in biotech or in food discovery or in ingredient discovery where you start with 20, not 200,000 or everything that's ever been discovered. So sort of marrying the two concepts together, I think has been a really interesting challenge for us.
Excellent, thanks for that. So going to the question, so Jocelyn Park has asked two questions, which I think are related, and whoever wants to answer first, pop in, and we'll manage it. And not everybody has to. We don't have to go across the whole panel, but so the two parts of the question are, number one, and it sort of relates to what you guys were just talking about, which is, so do you think you are relying too heavily on AI within your company, or do you think there needs to be a push for more integration within your company and the industry? And then the second part of the question, which relates to this, is what other technologies or tools would be a good complement to AI for your company? So whoever would like to hop in on that, feel free.
I'm happy to start. I want to play off what Oliver was actually just saying, which I think is important, is that AI is ultimately a tool, right? And so I think we think about things really similarly to what Oliver was just describing, which is our job as a company is to provide a very, very good tool for you to add to your toolkit, right? And so it's not, the goal isn't to really replace all of the labor on farms for eternity, right, via AI. It's to give growers better tools that they can use to optimize their operations better because they're not looking at something or can't look at something today. So it's really giving you something to help make life better, make life more efficient, make business better in a way that's more efficient than you could do as a human alone, right? And sure, that might be reducing labor in some places, it may be shifting labor in some places, it may be thinking about these things, but it's a tool at the end of the day for a toolkit. So as far as relying too much on AI, again, you asked 3 AI companies, so I'm sure the answer might be yes. That is what our core offering is as a business. And so really the goal for us as a company is to introduce new ways for people to look at problems in a different, in a different way than they were looking at it before, to help them solve challenges that they couldn't solve before. And we view AI as the way to do that. I think when you look at other tools, kind of to the second half of this question, which is, what else should we be looking at? One of the things I think we've done really well as a company is we've actually we've acquired other companies into our portfolio because of that exact question, is what do we also need to think about to create a holistic solution for growers? So if we think about it from this lens of our goal is to give technology-based tools to growers to look at problems in different ways to solve challenges more effectively, then what else needs to come into that? And some of the things that we've acquired are hugely high-tech applications, and some of them are not, right? Some of them are knowledge-based opportunities. And so at the heart of what we do, computer vision and AI, but acquiring Artemis in was an opportunity to level out the playing field to kind of get that first level of technology into the field. When you're not ready for AI yet, you might not be ready to optimize things. You may not be ready to automate things, but you want to start moving towards data collection in a more intelligent way, or more remote management in a different way, right? We've also acquired a consulting company that really focuses on integrated pest management, for example, and that allows us to supplement to our existing horticultural team internally that we use to really augment the AI. So you've got the AI on one side, you've got the technology solution on one side, you've got humans on the other side though. And we've got this horticultural team that can help you come in and actually work together on a plan to remediate something or to work to optimize something. So an example, if you're experiencing a pest pressure disease in your plant and the AI is really identifying that for you and understanding it earlier, you can also work with the human side to create plans to actually fix that challenge, right? And so it doesn't have to be fully AI as a solution. I think that this ecosystem of solutions that come together to really bolster that toolkit is what's important to us as a company, and has led to a lot of the success, frankly, because it helps people think about things in different ways. It doesn't have to just be about replacement. It doesn't just have to be about automation. It can be about faster data collection, better data collection, cleaner data sets, right? To the points made earlier. What do I need to do as an operation if I want to optimize or improve or fix or whatever my challenge is that I'm having?
Cool, thank you for that. Any of you other guys want to pop in on this, or should we move to the next question?
Maybe just a quick.
Whoops, go ahead.
Just a quick thought on the first half of that, on integrating our companies in the industry. I think, Allison, I think you hit it in the head and to your answer at the beginning of the conversation, which is, it's like whether or not AI is at the heart of our companies or other companies, is AI is not the problem, or it's not the issue or the solution. Even like the other thing is like health is the North Star for Brightseed. Plants are the important thing for farmers, right? And that is the optimizing function. And so I think that we will continue to see more and more integration if and only if each of our companies addresses the core issue in the ecosystems that we're working in, and it's a good litmus test, because otherwise, AI is only, it's a really interesting academic exercise until it actually hits the field or becomes a product that impacts someone's trajectory of someone's health, and that's when things get really exciting.
So I'm glad you brought that up. And the next question is by a gentleman named Gene Giacomelli. I believe I pronounced the name right. But before I actually ask that question in a modified way, what you just brought up is really important. I think this gets to the heart of why there's sometimes a disconnect between where you guys are as companies and where some of the, especially the larger legacy sort of customers or folks in the value chain you need to interact with are. And that is that, interestingly, these larger, much older companies often are not able to express the specific question, which is the raison d'etre or North Star, as you just put it. And so really, really interestingly, the company that actually has, very successfully created, some sort of products that have created enormous value, so have this incredibly sharp focus, when they interact with groups like you guys, they actually have trouble expressing the specific question, which then leads to your frustrations. And I think since you're research-based companies, that's true for the university side as well. And I think just collectively, as we go forward, really, really important to, for interactions to really, keep reminding people that we're all talking to. It's like, so what is it exactly that you're trying to do? Because otherwise people walk into the rooms with you guys and it's like, oh, you're the AI people with plants. You're going to solve everything. Where's the red button that I get to push in order to get the whatever answer I want? And so I think you guys just hit at the heart of a really important communication point. So then, with respect to the question Gene is asking, and I'll modify it slightly, but he wanted to start with Allison. So what would be a specific example where AI has helped resolve a customer problem or some sort of very specific thing? And I'd go across to Oliver and then Sofia as well. You guys have very specific examples of interactions, and where AI has made a difference for your companies.
Yeah, so our customers are often coming to us for things that are either very risky for the business or optimization. Those are usually the two sort of areas broadly. And more specifically, you could think about that as, I need to increase my yield in some capacity. And so therefore I want to analyze things like germination rates, growth rates on a daily basis, those types of things that kind of bubble up into optimization. On the risk side, really issue detection, so plants, disease, all the types of things that are maybe difficult to see potentially with the human eye, or you spot them too late. So a very specific example, a customer was experiencing chlorosis. They were growing lettuces. Chlorosis, if you've ever grown plants at home, you might have seen some yellowing in leaves, right? So the yellowing that you see, you can't really sell the plants in retail if you've got it. And so it's a huge impact on revenue directly. But oftentimes, because things like lettuce grow too quickly, you can't spot it until it's too late. And so you end up losing that revenue. It becomes wasted product. Our system was able to spot chlorosis within 24 hours of it appearing on the lettuce leaf in production. And so we were able to work with the growers to fully remediate that and eliminate the chlorosis issue. And again, like, you're always going to have chlorosis. It's not like we're going to Harold, to your point, it's not like we come in, we wave the magic wand, and using AI and information, chlorosis is now gone from your operation. It's a challenge. You're going to have to continuously manage your climate, your irrigation, your plants, right? That all has to come into balance continuously for forever. What we can do is come in though and identify it faster, and then work with you to remediate so that you can recoup your revenue and not have to waste the crop product or the revenue coming off of that. And so that's just more of a specific example around plant issue detection.
So faster, better, cheaper.
Yep.
Oliver, what's your specific example?
Yeah, I mean, I think going off Allison's point a minute ago, like the challenge with all of this is never, it's never the AI, the design. The AI is what gets you to a point where, for us, you know, we're a very young company, but we're able to have serious conversations with serious executives at serious companies and be at the point where we are selling and iterating and working with them because we have the technology to back us up very early days. Now, the questions, the age-old problems are still there. So you've still got the sales, you've still got the building the trust, you've got the relationships, you've still got like, and in tech and sort of, you know, biotech, you've always had the idea of, you know, you've got a platform or a technology that can do something and you've got a product need. So there's always something in between. But to speak of, so like a lot of what we focus on is that meshing together of what you've got and what they want. But that's in my mind, the age-old problem. That's always been the problem with selling anything. We're just now fortunate enough to be, even in the very early stage company, be at the situation where we can have those serious conversations, be having those iterations. But, you know, examples in the food space are, we've got customers who, for example, they have on the discovery end, they have 4 enzymes that do a certain type of manufacturing for their product. You know, they're 4 in the world and they're super valuable. They come from hydrothermal hot vents. I mean, we ran an expedition to hot vents just last week. We had a dive team out in the middle of the Atlantic, like going and finding more of those. So like on a discovery end, that's the first thing. Like, you know, these people have something they want more of, and it comes from nature, and then you've got to basically do the logical steps working backwards of where's it come from, how am I getting more, all that sort of stuff. But like the interfacing bit is still there. Then on the design part, you know, you've got people who want modifications or engineering or different applications. But at the same time, if you truly have a broad platform, it's all it is conversations with people where you're like, I have X problem, I have this thing, and it's your entire job is interfacing the two things.
Got it. Sofia?
I have a very, very specific kind of example, and I'll talk about Brightseed's own pipeline, because we work with partners also very broadly and enabling them through Forager's insights. But I'll go to an internal example too, so that I am not constrained and I can give you the whole arc of it. Brightseed started one of our very first, you know, areas of health that we wanted to tap into was metabolic health. Over 90% of US Americans are metabolically unhealthy. It's one of the reasons why our population has suffered from COVID complications much more than many others around the world. In particular, 2 billion people around the world are at risk or have a condition called a fatty liver. And when your liver gets saturated with fat, it cannot detox your bloodstream and you get a bunch of other complications. So it's super prevalent. There is no drug, there is no cure for it. And we had a hypothesis that there were natural bioactives out there that could help with this condition. And that is the question that we posed to Forager, our AI system. We know exactly the biology that we need to modulate or target. What compounds out there exist that can do that. And once Forager predicted those compounds and we validated them in the lab, then we asked the follow-up question, which is very important for this audience, which is what plants actually have the capability to generate these compounds that can have this health effect. And we Forager predicted over, around 200. We validated the presence of this natural bioactive. It's called NFT or NCT in over 80 of them. And we selected 2 that we're very excited about. One of them is the most humble of all spices, black pepper. These compounds are present in black pepper. Some black peppers around the world express many more times the amount of this compound than others, back to my metadata kind of answer a while ago. And we also found it in a waste stream in the hulls of hemp seeds. So we are really excited to take to market this the hemp hull version. We're going to launch it later this year with which is very important application, not only for metabolic health, which we have published data on, but we also found important effects of it in gut health. So weight management, metabolic health, and gut health. So we're going to go to market later this year with hemp hull based product for specifically for gut health in this case. And it's kind of an example of soup to nuts. Without AI, we would not have been able to identify the compound that would modulate this biological target. We would not have been able to find the plant sources that are likely to produce this compound. And then with all of the validation that came downstream, now we're coming, at the end of this exciting journey to a product that will be in the hands of consumers and will actually make a difference not too far from now.
Very cool. That's very specific, and it's very good in terms of the pieces of the journey sort of through the food system. So this may be the last question I'm going to ask you guys, depending on the time, but so thinking from graduates that you would want to, talent that you'd want to source from the 4 universities that are represented by APHIS. So who would be, can each of you characterize at least one graduate that you would like to hire from this group? Anybody can jump in.
Yes. We're recruiting. Check out Brightseed Bio for all open positions.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to name one role, we're always specifically also always looking for a computational biologist to join our team. And, I could detail out the skill sets and the experience and all that jazz, but I think it's also a really important moment to underscore the values that we recruit for. And Brightseed, it really was built on 2 fundamental values, trust and truth seeking. And we want people that can trust each other, trust their teammates, that can be trustworthy, and that makes them really great collaborators. And we're a very open team. And truth seeking, fundamentally, we're having a science and AI kind of conversation here, and being honest about the impact of our work, being honest with each other about the feedback we receive, and just how we work with that clarity, seeking clarity beyond and above like egos or anything else, are 2 out of 5 fundamental values for Brightseed. But a computational biologist that is excited about that kind of those kinds of values in a company is someone we would be looking to hire.
Awesome.
And many
Thank
other
you.
open roles.
Allison?
So take a look at that.
All right, so go to brightseed.com.
Yeah, we're also hiring a ton of roles. So I would say, go to our careers page as well at iUNU.com. If you're interested in the AI industry and how it impacts the indoor farming industry in particular, we're hiring everything from the marketing side all the way up through computer vision and AI engineers. And so I would say if you're especially interested in the AI side, one of the hardest roles we found to fill is people who have really good fundamental understanding and talent in the computer vision side of things. And so if you're dabbling into computer vision, we'd love to chat with you. And I would similarly echo, values are incredibly important to us as a company as well. We love people who are entrepreneurial. We love people who are deeply curious. We love people who want to, to dig in and continuously learn and to grow. And so, we're definitely hiring. I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me personally. I'll put my email in the chat as well if you're interested in chatting more.
Awesome, thank you. And Oliver, in addition to offering an overseas assignment, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what the other said. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. We're hiring across the board. I think what's very interesting with the future of this field, I feel, is the ability of engineers and data scientists and computer experts to communicate with the others within their organization. So we have that very acutely at the moment. So we have, I said at the start, but like explorers and people doing, conversations with the UN and people doing conversations with the big customers and all that sort of stuff. And importantly, no one really, the way we built the team is everyone's an expert in their area, but no one is an expert on every single thing. So you need to be able to communicate and understand and help problem solve. So like, as we said before, AI is the core. AI is an amazing resource to be able to use. It accelerates, it gets what allows us to answer and ask the questions that we're able to, but we need people who are able to communicate with the others within the team and are very happy and willing to learn. I think, with a startup, it's very different to a big company. If you join the engineering department of a big company, you will get training, you will get formal leadership, you will get promotions within your thing, and you will get a lot better expertise than you're likely to get at a startup. Whereas a startup, you need to learn from everybody else. You need to, you get a much broader range of experience, and you have to figure out a lot more out for yourself. So I think when people are considering joining a startup or a big company, there's no right or wrong answer. And I think whenever I have a job interview, I always try and put people off a startup almost. So like, have you actually thought about the reality of not having someone to guide you every day and hold your hand and do all these things? And I think for everybody, it's just that personality switch. You've just got to reason with yourself. There's no, you just be very unhappy if you choose either a big company or a startup and it's not the environment for you.
Awesome. That was great advice to end this. So I want to thank all of you guys. We hit this right on the nail nail on the head in terms of the timing, but thank you guys for your for the speaking, that you did earlier this quarter, as well as participating in this panel. Really appreciate it. And since it's being recorded, lots of folks can watch it beyond the live audience. So really appreciate it. So Hannah, back to you.
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to echo that. We really appreciate your talks, and then you giving your time today to give further insight to our group. Oliver, Sofia, Allison, thank you so much. And Harold, thank you for guiding this conversation. This has really been a lot of fun to hear all your different perspectives on this. So thank you to our attendees, and we'll look forward to a new speaker series in the fall.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.